If you're looking for a new job, and or if you're about to take over a new challenge, and or you're preparing for A-levels and you're a parent, you basically would like to use the best of your brain, and you need some inspiration. Challenge of change, the next 4 episodes are basically what you're looking for, I think, so that you can be the owner of your brain. If you're looking for improving your IQ, if you're looking for improving your EQ, and or if you'd like to understand the hormones, how they work, how they manipulate your brain and your life. Challenge of change is basically great for that you can be the owner of your brain, not vice versa. So let's start to understand this. We all have one of these. And this is, I say all the time, it's the cockpit, basically. We have to understand that both of these hemispheres basically are completely separated from each other. And they have, I say all the time, like in chess figures, so every figure have got their own responsibility, right? So is with our hemispheres. Our right hemisphere works like a parallel processor. It scans the things like the bird perspective from the above, right? Our left hemisphere works like a serial processor. It scans the things from top down. Zzz, zzz. So from the mathematicians, they understand that for left hemisphere we only have Pascal theory, 1 or 0. And all these, all these 2 processors basically have been introduced to us throughout the history in so many different ways, right? So because we've got these 2 computer processors, giant computer processors in us, parallel processor, serial processor. In the medieval times, the parallel processor was introduced to us as the concept of angel, right? So wants to have the connectivity to the world, wants to have happiness, holistic happiness, wants to have peace, right? Wants to discover new things. Where the left hemisphere, the analytical serial processor, would like to have money, power, gold. Yeah, I would like to reach targets. Later, in the 1970s, when the religion didn't play a very important role, our right hemisphere was the concept of heart. Oh, by the way, our right hemisphere controls everything on our left side of our body, and vice versa. And the concept of left hemisphere, the serial processor, was introduced to us as the concept of head. So when I listen to my head, then this and that, then I listen to my heart, this and that. So when you just take a look at your decision-making processes, then you just basically see that your left hemisphere, so basically your head voice, tells you to play it safe, to be analytical. You compare with your left hemisphere most of the time, and with the right hemisphere, basically with the concept of heart, you basically would like to feel happy, you would like to be released, you would like to be connected to the rest of the world, you'd like to travel, right? So when we take a look at the generations as well, then we just see this phenomenon. The generations, traditionalists and baby boomers, were trained to tick on the left hemisphere. They're analytical. They say all the time, hey, do something safe and sure, where the right hemispheric generation Y and Z, especially beyond that, they would like to be connected to the world. This is the concept of that our parents basically tells us we have to buy a house, we should save money, and you basically say, hey, you know, like, you bought the house, why should I just spend or do the same thing, basically, just like you did? I'd like to discover and see the world. Today, these 2 processors are being introduced to us as the IQ and EQ concept, right? So we hear it everywhere, how important EQ is. We hear it everywhere. Without EQ, we wouldn't be able to be really successful. And yet, the importance of left hemisphere, or the abilities of left hemisphere, is just going to be taken over by artificial intelligence in the next 10 to 20 years to come. Right? So human will use the left hemisphere to think logical, to compare However, we actually will get the jobs done and also create how we are, basically, with our right hemisphere. We are human doings, I say all the time, with the left hemisphere, and we are human beings with the right hemisphere. Right? The left hemisphere gives us the to-do lists all the time. You have to tick the boxes so that you can reach something, and right hemisphere visualizes, so gives you actually a vision. So you'd like to be happy in a nice house with a garden, 2 kids, 2 dogs, and you visualize this, and then you give this or delegate this job to the left hemisphere so that he just buys lotto tickets, plays lottery, or basically just say, oh, I have to just do further education so that I can get more money, etc. So right hemisphere visualizes, gives you the compass where you should be like, and left hemisphere is responsible for getting these visions that your visualizations basically come true. So, and we know that EQ is today more important than IQ. We have to understand again how these 2 hemispheres basically work. Our left hemisphere is verbal. It speaks to us in words. Because the language centers attached to it, our left hemisphere is very intelligent, and it can argue with us because it's got the language tool. Our right hemisphere communicates to us with the feelings. Any brain owner understand that. You know, you just have an interview, for example, if you're interviewing people at work, you have an interview and your head feeling or her head voice is basically your left hemisphere is telling you, well, take this person, we've been looking for such a profile for 2 or 3 years right now, or for months, so he's cheap, take him. So he's analytical and critical, he analyzes and says, okay, that's the best I get in the market, I take him. Our right hemisphere, its communication language is the feelings. So it cannot articulate itself, but it just sends you these feelings that you just say, oh, I've got a funny gut feeling, or my heart tells me, etc. However, the left hemisphere is so intelligent, as the equivalent of IQ, basically tells you, take him, so you listen to him most of the time. We all do. 4 or 5 months later, you just find out that this is not the right person, basically, you took on board. And all you can say is, I knew it, right? So, or you meet a person, you just totally fell in love, you got butterflies in your stomach, and there's something in your heart or your gut feeling, it's basically your right hemisphere, is just giving you that feeling. And your left hemisphere, the argumentative part, says, well, you know, like, he or she's a nice girl, he lives in the same town, and my parents like him, so, you know, you want jam on it. So, go ahead. You just listen to that head voice, you continue your relationship, let it be friendship or partnership, and half a year later or 1 year later, or sometimes years later, you find out that that wasn't the right partner for you, and all you can say it, I knew it. So our left hemisphere is basically is the argumentative part, where the right hemisphere is the part that works even faster. Neuroscience has found out our right hemisphere can perceive and process up to 5,000 mbits per minute, and our left hemisphere 50. So we've got a Ferrari and Fiat 500 in our heads, and we basically load everything on the analytical, critical, and sometimes anxious left hemisphere. So we have to understand this in the 21st century human being. We have to understand and put our bets, the very bets, on the right hemisphere, rather than giving a great value to the abilities of the left hemisphere. It will be taken over by the artificial intelligence anyway. By trusting and relearning to use the right hemisphere, we can only use the left hemisphere as a servant, and so will be the idea and support of the artificial intelligence in the next centuries and years to come. We have to understand that, basically. What do we do in Germany, I can tell, is that we are afraid of losing our security, the left hemisphere, right? The left hemisphere would like to have no risk right? Would like to have the security, would like to secure the gold, secure the things, and the right hemisphere would like to continue discovering the world, be open to new things. And this is the generation problems, how the different generations also use their right and left hemisphere. Baby boomers, traditionalists, sometimes generation X versus the generation Y and Z. Another important thing we have to understand about right and left hemispheric abilities is that our right hemisphere is the part that can think abstract. That is the part, the faster processor, and we're all looking for those people basically who can think out of the box. We always complain, well, you know, my colleague doesn't think out of the box or think differently or in the way I do. Well, because maybe they've got lacking abilities, let me formulate it this way, of the usage of right hemisphere. Maybe you're visual, you can think, you can realize and see the correlations quite well, but your colleague cannot. Maybe you can just see how you can use his or her abilities to complete your deficits, rather than, you know, pointing out he cannot do, I can do that. This is an idea how leadership abilities and this transformation, the mind shift from leadership management to leadership basically functions. Right? So you have to start understanding how you can do the mind shift by seeing the abilities of yours, also those around you. And this is how you can enable your brain instantaneously to look at your colleagues and to your surrounding, to your team members differently, that how they can complete you best. All these visionary personalities, Marie Curie, Dalai Lama, Nelson Mandela, all these personalities have visualized something and they broke it down to to-do lists, delegated to the left hemisphere, and made it possible that we all know. Then we just dive into the right and left hemisphere's abilities a little more, then we know that right hemisphere is the part where our intuition basically lives. Right, where our left hemisphere, I all say all the time, is the RAM, and the right hemisphere is the processor of a computer. So we basically categorize and put things on the RAM of a computer, right? And to process and to play a really cool computer game, for instance, or to really watch good films and good quality, we need a good processor on the computer. So our right hemisphere is the processor and left hemisphere is the RAM. Take a look at it from this perspective. So as we know, or as we learned, that the left hemisphere is the verbal part. It can be very manipulative, and it also just speaks to us if not observed all the time. It's the brain chatter part all the time. How do we stop the brain chatter? There's a wonderful exercise. Basically, you can just concentrate behind your heart and close your eyes. If you want to, you can also stare at a certain point. I'm just staring at the camera's objective right now, and ask that very point, where is my next thought? And wait. When you ask this question behind your heart to that very point, it gets quiet, right? So you basically manipulate, just say hello to the left hemisphere, and it just cleans up all the apps and asks yourself the questions like, where's my next question? What happens in that moment is that all the running apps in the background just clears. Try it, and this is a great cure, a short rehabilitation for your brain in your everyday life. And how do we recognize the right hemisphere in the next days or until the next episode to come? Is basically listen to your feelings. Listen to your feelings more and more, and take them seriously. Thoughts are considered to be a part of the sixth senses or the seventh sense in some cultures. Why? Your thoughts are a great tool to basically giving you some ideas how you can master certain things, but your feelings are basically the right compass to master your life. In 2 weeks, in a new episode, I'm going to talk about growth versus fixed mindset. It's proven by neuroscience that growth mindset stimulates all the networks in our right hemisphere and fixed mindset stimulates the neural networks in the left hemisphere. Stay tuned. I look forward to seeing you. Additional to Challenge of Change, you can also download How to Boost Your Brain.